graphic design. He went through the architecture program, undergrad, and then he went on for a master's in graphic design. Taught in the graphic design program and still does in the area we're talking about today. And he has a firm called
Extra Small Design.
Extra Small Design. So he and his wife do that, and they have worked around the country, some of it with Google, and you can tell us more.
Okay. Thanks. So yeah, I'm Kyle. I've been brought on to help craft and design and build the website for this project that's going to kind of showcase the entire timeline of the lake. And yeah, that's my role and that's my goal here. So I've been brought in today just to talk a little bit about like what we're doing, how we're approaching that, what we need from all of you in terms of content. I've got some preliminary mock-ups. They're just basically like to get the idea out there of like, maybe this is what we could do. Like John and Dave haven't even seen these yet. They're just totally, hey, like this is what a timeline could look like. But really a lot of it's gonna depend on like the content that you're able to find and the story that like we wanna tell. So John has the beginning of the timeline set up, and what we've done is, I think you should all have access to the Google Drive now that Dave set up, is that correct? Did everybody get a link to the Honor 394 folder? Okay.
Nick was the last one. Did you see it come through?
Yeah, go on through.
Okay, so we just made a Google Doc in there called Timeline, and it's broken down by era, and John has a lot of pieces to that timeline already in another file. He's gonna move those over, but then as you're doing research and you're finding imagery and collecting data, we're gonna add it to that Google Drive, Google Doc file. It's separated. Dave just had me label all the eras, so like you'll have like your time spans in there and what the general categories are for those eras. My goal is to collect all of the information that's going into the website into that visual timeline in that one place. So we all have access to it and nobody's like duplicating efforts. And then when it comes time for us to design this timeline, we have all that content in one place. Because the types of content that you find are gonna change what the timeline looks like. Like if you find all kinds of amazing historical photos, but they're tiny, we'll have to take a certain approach to like how do we showcase those, versus if we have like amazing aerial photos like Dave has, like 60 megabyte aerials that we can like zoom into. That'll be like a cool feature of the website where you'll be able to actually like zoom into larger photos and like see more detail. So it really just comes down to like, what is all that content that we find and how do we let people explore it, navigate it, and understand the history of the lake. So yeah, everybody has access to that file. If you look at that file, currently it's broken down by era, and then I've got a little block example in the top there of like what we're looking for. So we want as exact of a date as you can get for your event that would end up on the timeline, a title for that event, whatever the information is, because same thing, like this is up to you, like you're doing the research. I'm not sure what's gonna end up on this timeline. If it's just the name of an event, fine. It could have more information and that might change the way we design the timeline. Right now we've got some pretty basic stuff, but like if you have sections that you're interested in, that you found a lot of information about, just because it's one entry on the timeline, we can still design that so like people can actually click on that event and actually like expand it and read more about it and have other information. It's not just like one event on the timeline gets one image. We can do all kinds of really cool stuff, but we just have to see what we have first. So that block is in there, and then Dave and I just added like an example one down towards the bottom in era 5 for graded images talk. Just like you populate it with as much information as you have. Like the rule of thumb is the more content that we have, the better for this, because that just gives us different opportunities to like showcase the information differently. So whatever you have, drop it in there. We'll kind of keep track of it.
You can always edit down.
Yeah.
It's really hard to edit up.
Yeah, it's always easier to like cut content than it is to like script to try to find new content or more information. Okay, so just to kind of like show you some possibilities, some ideas, some things that we're thinking about right now. We've got all kinds of things. So this would be one option where even like the core focus of the timeline, I think is a little bit up for interpretation. Like we want the visual timeline to be as thorough as possible. But within that, we could have special areas. Like we could have an area just on development, an area just on politics, the economics of things. I just hear it. The idea is that the website would be primarily the timeline, but it's also going to have information about the project. You'll all be credited for your work. If there's a 50th anniversary celebration, that would be featured on the website. So it'll be more than just the timeline. There'll be other pieces to the site as we kind of flesh it all out. So this was just like one possibility. What does the website look like? This is just looking at, oh, and you can't even see the whole thing because the resolution of this is low. Let me see if I can make this a little bit smaller. Yeah, so the idea that like the timeline could be very visual. People would be able to scroll through, navigate, they could jump around by years in the timeline on the right. If there's a lot of historical photos, like we might do things like this where it's kind of in a grid. If we have videos, we can do like big full bleed video stuff if it's in high resolution. There's all kinds of different possibilities. So this was just like one kind of initial concept. We looked at what happens as you scroll down the page. So something like this, where our navigation looks really nice and it's like overlaid over a photo. What happens as you scroll? And the photo goes away, you can't have white type on a white background. So what happens, sometimes what we'll do is like, we'll drop down a new header that stays like fixed to the page, so as you scroll the timeline, you can still jump around and do different things. And this is just kind of a different look at like what the opening to the timeline could be, the header of the site versus like the grid itself is still pretty much the same. And we've also looked at things like, if we have big images, like it all depends on how much content we have for each section of the timeline. Like if there's enough content, we might be able to like nicely break that timeline down by decades, or maybe like at the very beginning of that timeline, in era 1, it's a little bit looser. And then as we drill down into areas that we have more information about, we can do like really nice breaks within the timeline that could be like fluid video they're playing to like introduce a new decade. There's all kinds of possibilities. So these are just like some of the things that we've been playing around with, just to give you an idea of like all the stuff that you're working on, hopefully will be collected in a very nice way and displayed in a really cool kind of interactive way where people can really like, we can do zoomable images, we can do slideshows, just some nice stuff that kind of conveys the full history and all of the work that went into making the like what it is today. So yeah, that's that. I think specifics, there's stuff that you should know in terms of like finding content. On the web, the higher resolution you can find it, the better. Like you may have heard stuff on the web, stuff on the screen doesn't need to be high res, like it can be lower res, and that is kind of true, except all of your new like laptops and phones have what we call retina displays, which are like super high resolution, so we actually need images as big as you can possibly get them. So if an image is like this laptop, this 15-inch MacBook, the width of it in pixels is technically 2,800 pixels wide. So if we wanted super crisp, super high-res photos, we'd actually need them to be 2,800 pixels wide. I deal with like cropping multiple different versions and doing all kinds of stuff. But the key for you is to find stuff that's as high-res as possible. Videos that are like 1080p would be a high-definition video file. 720p and 1080p are like all current. If you find videos that are interviews from the past, like they might be lower resolution, and we can still have those on the website, but we're just gonna have to deal with them a little bit differently. Like we won't be able to take an old video and feature it like full width on the website. It'll look pretty grainy and bad. Yeah?
For those of us who are technologically challenged, what's a range of a good image for the resolution that you want? Like what's a good marker to look for? Like, I don't know.
So no, it's a good question. Like we can work with anything. It just limits like how big that image can be displayed.
Do you just have like, just for reference, so I can be like, oh, this is better than this one is?
if you want an image that's full width, like it needs to be at least 1800 pixels wide. If you were like, this image would look beautiful as like a full background on a website, it needs to be at least 16 to 1800 pixels wide. Anything lower than that, we can still absolutely feature, but it's just gonna be smaller. Like, in a layout like this website's, 1600 pixels wide, like maybe those images are 400 pixels wide. So if you find a smaller image, it's 400 pixels, we can still feature it, but no one will ever be able to see it any larger than that. Like, you can't zoom into it, you can't do anything fun.
What do you get out of a camera, iPhone camera?
It depends on your iPhone, like they range from 8 megapixels to 12 megapixels, so we can use it. Like if you can shoot it with your camera phone, we can use it. Like that'll probably be at least 1600 pixels wide, and it'll look pretty good. Like we can touch it up and do things in terms of image correction, but resolution-wise, like the dimensions of those photos, your camera phone's totally fine.
There's a lot of old photographs like those, particularly out of that McLaughlin collection that's now online from the library. They were all taken with a large format camera, and when they scanned them, they got a lot of resolution in them.
Yeah, so, and we'll be able to use that stuff, like if it was scanned in high resolution and those images are 1800 pixels wide or larger, like we'll be able to do nice bulky stuff. Like the aerial that Dave has to show you things like 64 megabytes as one photo, so that means it's huge. Like the overall dimensions of it, like we'll be able to zoom way into that as if it was a Google map, which will be pretty nice. So the bigger the better. I can deal with downsizing anything, so the larger images you find, the better. You're going to, anything that you find from like the ASU library, things like that, we also want to track all of the attribution on any of those images. So like, if you do a Google search, you'll find like a ton of stuff that's on like Shutterstock and things like that. Like we can't really use that unless somebody's gonna buy it. But anything that's in the ASU library, we probably can use, but we'll need to credit the original photographer or author or whoever was in the video. So in that Google Drive, in the Google Doc, there is a line for credit and attribution for that content. Because what we'll do is something like this, we might have like a small like eye or like a small little icon in the corner of photos, like when you mouse over them, that if you click on it, it might actually give you the attribution, and then like we'll have a page that's just dedicated to the credits of all the content that's on the site. So yeah, stuff like that.
I have a story about that attribution related to this course. The course was advertised on the Barrett webpage, and they used a photo of the Tempe Town Lake that this guy had taken. I get an email from him, he said, "Hey, you're using my photo and there's no credit there." So the college put this photo in there. He showed me his website and it was in his website. He had some beautiful work.
Yeah.
But that's the thing we have to watch is if we can get a photograph that, you know, if it comes from the ASU archives, you give them credit. But let's say you're just using a URL somehow, not the photo, but you link to a URL.
If you link to a public URL, like, you're okay, but if we're using an image that's from a public URL, you have to assume that that image is copyrighted as part of that website, so you should actually request to use the image, unless the image itself like has copyright information. Like there's Creative Commons licensing, so you'll see like the CC on things, and if you, usually those icons link off to like the Creative Commons page, because there's different levels of Creative Commons attribution. Like you can use this and modify it, you can use this but you can't modify it, you can use this but you have to give me credit, or you can use this and like you need to credit me but it doesn't need to be like public facing. Like there's weird stuff like that, and whenever you post content, like even if you post images on Flickr, things like that, those levels of Creative Commons licensing are usually kind of built into things. So on just some random person's website, that information might be hard to find. And you might actually have to like contact the person and track them down to see if you can use that image. But if you're on like a larger site like Flickr, you can usually just click a license and see that information. Same thing if you were like using Google image search to do some of that stuff. There's actually a filter in image search that allows you to search by images that are labeled for reuse or reuse with modification. So it would only return results that you are legally allowed to use. So there are things like that.
Okay, here's another one. Oral history, Grady Gamage. He did this class for us. We post his video. He said, hey, I didn't give you a release on that, right? So we really ought to be getting releases from the people that we record.
Yeah, probably.
Yes, good catch.
We do it for these people we interview for the Retirees Association. We've done 115 of them. And we do get them to sign a release. that can
Before we
use.
turn the camera on.
Yeah,
I haven't signed anything, burn this footage.
but then it's copyrighted by the Board of Regents.
Sure. So you need to give credit back to the Board of Regents.
So I'm not sure whether we'll use that on this or not. I probably will be an ASU document when we get done.
Well, in case of Grady Gamage, before we put him up on the web or in any public way, we have to give him a copy of the recording, and if he wants to redact anything, he's entitled to, and then we'll see if we can get him to sign off on it, which I'm sure he will.
I have some photos from like the Tempe Historical Museum. Is that stuff that we can use, or
That would
that I
be a
found
good thing to just
online?
like check. If you check their website, there's probably information about like
Okay.
if those images are in the public domain or if they're technically owned by the city of Tempe. I think like you can go visit the Historical Society's archives and stuff. I think that stuff's publicly accessible and it's probably fine to use as long as we credit it. But I would double check their website or
You
maybe
can also
email them.
usually email their like librarian or their curator,
Okay.
because they'll know better.
We have his email address.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it might honestly depend on what images you find from them. Like, they probably have different licensing for different things.
Okay.
And then, I mean, is there stuff in the design schools archives?
Oh, yeah.
So,
In the architecture library,
right,
as well as the main library.
yeah. So, all that stuff will be there too, and you'd be able to talk to the librarian. Yeah.
In the Google Doc, do you want the actual images or just a link to the image?
Just a link, so because that Google Doc would get crazy.
Yeah.
However it works for you, I don't know if you want to organize it by, like, folders by era, or folded, probably like the best thing would be to organize all the media by like folders by era, and then folders by like at least year, or if you wanted to do like era 1, decade, and then all the years within that, just to like keep the information as organized as you can.
Possible.
And then, yeah, just whenever you add something to Google Drive, like just grab the share link for that media and paste the share link into the big doc.
Can you bring up that Google Drive that you just modified, and we could talk from that?
Okay, so this is the timeline file. So it's broken down like this. Hello, everyone.
Now, let's say we bring an item in, why don't you import something, anything?
Does anybody else want to do it? Because you know your own content. Does anybody want to grab like any image that you have and just add an entry?
So, when they put content in and go in under their name, that last screen you
Technically,
showed,
you might want to flag it with, yeah, I guess, I don't know how you guys are dealing with this.
where is it gonna get parked coming in?
It'll all live, like, the image will be uploaded to Drive, and then they'll add in the event title and link off to anything. So if you also need to keep track of who's adding what, then maybe just like, put your initials above this, or like, whenever you add an entry, like, maybe it's underneath credit. That's like, student credit, and then just add your name there. So as we start to add entries, you can also keep track of who's adding what.
Okay, well, still, I wanna have an asset come in.
Yeah, no,
Somebody send
she's
me-
getting there.
She's.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's doing it.
Send me
I'm
something.
gonna put one of the photos in. See what happens.
Don't insert the photo, just insert the link
Yeah.
to the photo. The
Here,
share link.
I've got a link already.
Yeah. We don't want actual media in this file or it'll get nuts.
Yes.
I just put a link in on the top.
Well, I wanna start from the beginning. I want something to come in that you're gonna link to.
Yeah, so this is an image that you link to, right?
Yeah.
So-
the AFC library.
When it comes to the media like this, technically, I mean, that's the ASU library, so like that image is always gonna be there. And as long as you add the other information, like we'll be able to grab it, so that's fine. But other things, in theory, we would wanna collect the original images and keep them in Drive, organized by folder. So like rather than just like link to an image that lives on the internet, cause that URL could change over time. I would say actually go steal the image from that page, like right click it, do a save as to your own computer, and then drag that into Drive. Like organized
But
by.
put it where if you
Back
don't want it
here.
in there, in our personal folders.
I don't care how you organize this stuff, that's up to you guys. I would say like, because the deal is, if you keep your media organized in your own folders, just so you can keep track of who has what,
Okay.
like that's up to you. And it won't matter as much to me because when I look at content, I'm gonna hop into the timeline file and I'll look at an entry and then I'll click on the link that you provide.
So it's like putting the picture in the drive, kind of like a backup if the link.
fails.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's like a typo in the link, or if that website's down temporarily, like when I click on it, things like that.
So you import it into Google Drive.
Yep.
And it's sitting there, and then you link to that file.
Yeah, so are you, or is somebody doing that at the moment, or
Doing what?
linking to a file from Google Drive?
No.
Can
Okay.
you?
Technically,
I don't
like,
know,
does anybody have images in their folders right now?
I do, but do you just like
I'll show you, which folder is yours?
Nicole,
Nicole Hernandez?
So these are all images in Drive,
Yeah.
and there's a link button up here.
Oh, okay.
So you just select the thing you want and you say get shareable link. Link shareable, only specific things. Oh, maybe because this is your folder and I can't technically do that.
Oh, okay.
But you can turn that on, or you should be able to.
Okay, here it is. On. Did that work?
And now, well, maybe it's still just not for me, but can you do it if you click the
Yeah,
button?
I can do it.
And it gives you a URL, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would paste that URL in over here. And then that way, we have all the events in one place, but I could click on it and jump off to the file.
well, they have to push it in, you can't pull it. Is that what you just said?
They would keep all their original media organized in folders, and they would just link to it in here. Because if they insert media into this file, it's gonna get crazy to like scroll through it and find stuff, so.
All right, so
Sorry.
let's go one more time here.
Hold on, what's your question?
Did you want us to go through and like for all those fixtures, do you want us to add like links to all those fixtures to this, or?
Yeah, I would, like, say you have 5 pictures, but they're from one event, you would just do one event entry
Oh, okay.
and just put 5 links in.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
So your cursor's right here, and then you do a link somehow, what do you,
Just paste
how do you
it.
get that in?
So like, let's see, can I do back here, this turn on? Okay, so see how there's this link in here?
Yeah,
I copy this and I just come over here and I hit like
okay.
media paste. And now that is a link. So if I go into this file and I click on this, I can look at that exact photo. As long as you, oh, I'm just signed into the wrong account, but that's fine. That's my own personal thing. I have like 5 different Google Drive accounts. So yeah, but that's how it would work. you paste in the link, and then as long as that asset's like shared in the shareable folder and we all have access to it, that'll just work.
Are they gonna hit a capacity limit with their individual Google Drives?
No issue.
No, yeah,
You guys get a lot of,
15 gigs or something.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty high storage limit. So does that make sense? Yeah. Like, copy and paste the link. There's this one. Yeah, so this is perfect, whoever's typing this right now.
Oh, that's me.
Nice job.
For the event title, like I just took that title from the photograph that the ASU library has for it.
Sure.
Is that cool?
Works for me.
Make it something it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's okay. And then if there was other information that like went with this, like if all you have is a title for the image, like that's fine. But if there was like a title and a caption, just like add the caption there as well. And then that way like we can start to add all that stuff to the site.
What about like, I'm doing like the recreation, so a lot of mine is like anecdotal kind of things, like little stories and like interesting. So like how do I get permission to use those? You don't know? Because there's a lot of really interesting stuff, like you were talking about the beauty pageant and that kind of thing, like there's really interesting stuff that used to happen around the lake, so I don't know how they.
You should probably just like ask the source
Yeah.
for housing.
Yeah.
So you're doing a project, would like to use this.
Well,
Permission
speaking
slip.
to that question,
Email or something?
Yeah.
if you write up the anecdote
Mm-hmm.
in a paragraph or two, does a Word document or a text document work the same
Yeah.
fashion?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you could add that doc to Google Drive and then just link to it in this timeline view.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say you have an image and then somewhere you need to write a paragraph on what it is. Is that one of these, information to be included would be,
Yeah, would you
The text of
rather
it.
that I just like put that in the information to be included, or would that I do like a link to a small document?
I think it's gonna be up to your discretion.
Whatever,
If
okay.
it's a lot of content,
Then do it.
put it in a separate file. If it's like a paragraph,
Yeah, it'll probably
Yeah,
just be
drop
like
it.
little short.
sure.
Okay.
Do you want us to like, in information, do you want us to like sort of interpret the material that we have, just so you have something to like post with it, or?
Yeah, absolutely, like, the more, like, if, keep in mind that like, this will be on a public facing website, and people don't like to read a lot. So
Right.
what we usually do as a tactic is like, we'll keep like bullets of information that people can like skim and read, but then we give them the opportunity. So like if there's more information that goes with a particular event or item, like they can usually click on it or like toggle it open and like they can read as much as they want. Like we keep all the content up there, but we try to just kind of minimize the initial view to make it a little bit easier to digest. Somebody else said something and I was like, should I point that out?
Well, speaking to that issue, somebody who encounters this website in some future year, maybe they find it when they're doing a topical search on artificial lakes, or then they hit on this. What's the quick way to scan down for the topic they're looking for within this website?
So it'll really just come down to like how much content there is, right? So say these events over time, like as you're doing research and you collect a lot of information, we could either just have all of the event entries like be on one timeline, or each entry may actually get its own page of the website that's like dynamically pulled into that timeline. So as you skim like the highlight timeline, if you click on anything, it could take you to an individual page just about that section. So if they were Googling like artificial lakes, they may end up on the timeline, but they would probably end up on the individual page that's about like the history of the construction. It just depends. So like at a higher level, like we can easily have a search feature that like filters the timeline by keyword, so like we could do that. To let
We
people
enter
find
the
things.
keywords individually ourselves, or is it done by a search somehow?
It all depends how you want to structure it. So one thing that we can do is just filter, like literally have the whole timeline there and just have a search box where if you start typing words in, it will just start dropping events out of the timeline that don't match the keywords that somebody enters. So it would literally be looking for a match between your search key term and a word in one of those entries. Or we could also have a tagging system, and that's something that like maybe you would want to work on in this class to develop. Like, can we start to tag some of those events? Like you said, you're focusing on recreation. So like recreation could be a tag, and in that timeline view at the top, we could have like a filter and just say like, see anything about recreation, and it could filter out the timeline to only show you events that are related to recreation. You could have a construction tag, so if you click that tag, it would filter the timeline and show you all the events that have to do with construction. But what those tags are would be up to you, and kind of based on the research and the content that comes out of this, I'd say. But yeah, there are a lot of different ways that we can let people interact with the content. We just need to kind of get it, figure out how you want to tag it, how you want people to explore it.
How does Google itself work? You type in, open up Google and type in recreation, we get about 2 million hits there.
Sure. So if you are searching for something about the lake, like, and we have a lot of content about the lake, like the website itself that we're working on would maybe come up. It just depends on how specific that search is. If you just type in like lake recreation, you're gonna get like Havasu and things like that.
Yeah.
But if you search like construction of Tempe Town Lake, it's quite possible that this website will like come to the top now, because how many other sites are out there that really talk about how the lake was constructed? Not many. So it just depends on like what people are searching for and how specific. But in terms of the site architecture, like we build the thing out so it's easy to index for Google. Like Google will find everything on this site, scrape it, index it, and let people search for it, like through normal search results.
So Google is, at that level, Google is doing it for us, and
Yeah, they're gonna soak in everything from the site. Yeah.
I added a bunch of pictures, but could you make sure that the link actually allows you to see it? Because I don't know if the sharing settings are on the
I probably.
It's on the bottom, it's in the present day.
It might yell at me because I'm logged in under a different account, but let's see.
I just clicked the words.
It does?
Yeah.
Yeah, hold on. If I switch accounts to my extra small
Because
account.
I think the privacy settings are like, an ASU
Yep.
email.
I can see it as long as I'm logged in under the right account.
Cool.
So, and now that should work if I click edit. Or Google Drive hates me, so. Okay, extra small every time. But that's fine. So it does work, like, because you've shared, your folder is in a shared folder.
Okay.
So like, because we all have access to the top level folder, I think we all have access to all the stuff that's in the folders. So we should be good.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so this is perfect for entry. Any other questions for me about site content? I think some of it will just come back to like how you want to organize things. Like as you are doing the research, if you find like themes that like tie certain elements of the project together, like we can start to pull those things out as tags. And if we do that, then you would end up coming back into the timeline and we'll want to add like a tag section. So like in an entry like this, like we would have a tag and then you would come up with whatever the name of that tag is. But we don't want to like have all kinds of similar tags. So like with any tagging system like this, like we're really looking for high level like categorization. So that's why you all need to be on the same page about it. We don't want like recreation, fun, play, like, we just want one term for that to be able to start to filter things out more efficiently.
Tag is the same as a keyword.
I would say a keyword's super specific, and I'd say a tag should be a little bit more broad, like a category. So like, you could call it a category instead, if that like makes any more sense. That would be like construction, right? Because like a keyword within construction could be anything. It could be like concrete, curing time, like bulldozer, right? Like those would all be keywords within that are really specific. In a larger level category of just construction would kind of cover all of those different things.
So we need a general tagging system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just a possibility, like, we don't have to let people filter that way, like, we could, but it really depends on the themes that you pull out of the research and the content that we end up with.
Floods,
Yeah.
that's a category that spans all of these eras up until the present era when the river looks like it's finally been tamed. We may never see another flood.
Crossing the river.
Yes.
And that could be a fun, like, thing to see, like, if you click floods and the whole timeline filters out and just shows you, like, all the events, and so you can quickly see, like, every time the river flooded, like, that'd be kind of fun, so.
Yeah, we have a list of the historic floods.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, like, hopefully, there's media that goes with all the events, but some of it could just be anecdotes. So, like, the other thing in the timeline, like, we started to do, like, little things like this, where, like, if we don't have content, like, we might be able to add, like, icons, illustration work that, like, starts to help tell that story a little bit. If we're missing, like, little pieces of media here and there, we can start to, like, add to it to give the whole site a little bit more of a cohesive feel. Like, if we have a language, a visual language for icons like the bridge, then, like, that might occur, like, all throughout the timeline, and it just helps tie things together a little bit more. So.
We picked up a few errors already. That central image was in the library's little teaser series of pictures from this McLaughlin collection, but it was labeled Mill Avenue Bridge.
1931.
It's not. It's the Ash Avenue Bridge, 1903 or something.
1913. You got the numbers transposed. Because that bridge over to the left, which is a railroad bridge, that was gone by 1931. And the new railroad bridge is to the right of the Ash Avenue Bridge. So, we corrected that with the library.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you have questions for me along the way, which probably won't unless they're like weird technical questions about images, you can happily direct them to me. My email address is just Kyle, K-Y-L-E, at extrasmalldesign.com, all one word, EXTRASMALL design.com. But yeah, otherwise, like if it's larger picture questions like categorization, like how you're classifying things, what falls under what era, like direct those to John and Dave, and if they have things, like they're always gonna forward me things.
I might have missed this, but did you say what, like file type you want for pictures or anything like that?
We talked a little bit about size and resolution. When it comes to format, like we can deal with pretty much anything. So like if it's a JPEG, PNG, TIFF, everything will be fine. Like we can convert it. The bigger question is like resolution and quality, and that was like if you want an image to be full browser width, it'll have to be at least 16 to 1800 pixels wide. Anything smaller than that, we can still use it, but like it'll only be able to be seen smaller. And then the higher resolution, the better. So like over 1800 pixels is awesome because it just means we can like zoom into it and we can do other things with it. But yeah, image formats are pretty good. Like stuff to know about image file formats if you care. Like TIFF is theoretically like the highest quality. Like it's usually not compressed in any way. Like a JPEG is compressed and it's optimized for photographs, and a PNG file is compressed, but it's optimized more for line work. So like if you found a map, it might be in a PNG file if somebody knew what they were doing, versus like a photograph of the lake is probably going to be saved as a JPEG. Like JPEG's the most common, but those file formats do have slightly different qualities.
So the parallel question then is text. How do you prefer to get text?
The text should be selectable like in a Word doc, Google Drive. Like Google Doc is totally fine. If it's a small like information headline like this, that might be something that we pull directly out of that Google Doc, out of the information section in an entry. If it needs to be shown on a website and like selectable, I need it in a text-based, like a digital text-based format, whether it be Word doc, Google Drive, TXT file, like I don't really care.
Pages from Mac?
Yeah, Pages is fine too. I can deal with most everything.
Okay, last chance, Kyle.
If you need anything, you can email me. And I'm on campus. I teach in the design school on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the graphic design program. And I'm usually here more than that, so.
If you do email them, courtesy copy us as well.
Sure,
just
yeah.
So we can coordinate this and see where you're at and what problems you're having.
Yep.
And we'll start courtesy copying you on things that we're sending to them.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I actually have, Dave added me to the Blackboard. So if you send announcements out for Blackboard, I'll get them. And then same thing, I'm in that Google Drive folder now, so I have access to that, so I can kind of see the content as it comes in. And then I'll keep tabs on the timeline, just to see like as events are added to it. Because once we have some of that content in there, and once you're able to get some of your initial events from the timeline you already have typed up into that format, like that's where we'll start to collect all of them, and that'll help us shape what the timeline looks like.
So we're abandoning Dropbox.
Is that
Yeah.
a deal?
Yes.
We're dropping Dropbox. Here, one last question. We were talking about this as we were driving over, that newspaper story from Arizona Central, which is the online version of Arizona Republic newspaper, which I assume you've all read. There were lots and lots of topics touched on there, and a couple of useful things like how many gallons in an acre foot of water. I didn't know. Dropping something like that wholesale into the timeline, what copyright issues do we run into there?
Well, what do you mean by dropping it into the timeline?
Just
Like, are you
A
gonna,
link to that.
An excerpt or?
A link to that newspaper story.
if you're just linking to a newspaper story, I mean, like, that gives full credit to that. Like, it's not like you're stealing content and putting it on your site, you're just gonna link off to it. So like, we would,
Their
I think that
banner
would be
is on
fine.
the thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Once you like click that link, you're on their website, so it's not like we're taking credit for their content, like, we're just linking to a story. It's the internet, I think it's okay.
That was the front page story today in the paper, although you got it yesterday.
Yeah, the online one seems to be about 24 hours ahead of the hard copy version. But then we were wondering out loud, so how long does a story like that survive in cyberspace?
I'm pretty nerdy, so I could talk to you all day about how long things live on the internet. The answer is usually like not as long as you would think. Content lives a long time on the internet, but it doesn't usually live at the same URL. There's a guy that lives in the UK, his name's Jeremy Keith, and he like rants about like the longevity of things on the internet. And the basic premise is like, as technology changes and websites get moved and updated and advanced, like the URLs always get lost. So links break. Like they might last a few years, but if you look like 10 years out, like links are usually dead. Like just because
They throw
maybe
away
the
a
content's
computer.
still there, but like it's actually a different URL and nobody ever put like a redirect in place to take you to where it should have been, things like that, so,
Yeah.
yeah. That's why like getting the real content is important. If it's something like the ASU library system, more than likely that URL is gonna be the same for a very long time. But if it's from any other website, like grab the original image, save that to Drive so we have the original. You should probably still credit the URL, like you could drop in the URL that you found it from into the timeline, but that's one of those reasons is like things move and things change.
Yeah.
Alright,
All right, thank you, Kyle.
no problem.
Very helpful.